Good afternoon. My name is Darren Gale, and I'm with the City of Sacramento's Office of Innovation and Economic Development. I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar series, Resilience, Repurpose, and Recovery. Today we have a great program talking about what our local businesses need to continue doing and what you are doing to survive as we open up and as we have a new normal after this COVID-19. Again, for those who have participated in the past, we hold these each Wednesday at 2 o'clock. All of the videos are on the city's website at cityofsacramento.org/biz-webinars. So you can go back and see any of the past webinars. Additionally, we are broadcasting this live on Facebook Live. If you have any questions right afterwards, you want to go back and listen to anything that our presenters have talked about today, you can see that immediately. Otherwise, tomorrow morning we will have the video online. Next, just a brief disclaimer. The views expressed by the presenters are not necessarily those of Ernst & Young LLP or other members of the Global EY organization. These slides are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be relied upon as accounting, tax, or other professional advice. Please refer to your advisor for specific advice. And that leads into perfectly for me to introduce our speakers today. Really excited to have two professionals from Ernst & Young. First, we have Erica Ford, government and public sector return to work leader with Ernst & Young. We have Tony DeLisi, who's the state and local economic development leader. Both of them just a wealth of knowledge, and we hope that you'll take some great insights from them and hopefully be able to understand some things that are going on. During the presentations, if you have some questions, please don't hesitate to just go ahead through the chat, write your questions. We'll take those questions towards the end, or if there's a clarifying question, I'll kind of jump in and try to help out. At this time, I'll turn it over to our presenters, both Tony and Erica, and allow them to kick off their presentations. So I think, Tony, I'm turning it over to you first. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And good afternoon, everybody. It's funny being with you, but not being able to see you. It's not what I'm normally used to in these situations. But please ask questions. I think Eric and I both love a give and take as much as we can do that in this very distance type of presentation. But we're excited to talk to you today. And really, it's a crazy moment. We face a lot of uncertainty here in this pandemic, and nobody can say that they're used to this situation and that it's entirely new for all of us. But every business and every industry is facing different challenges and opportunities with this pandemic and thinking about what comes next. But really, we want to focus in on 5 things that we as all businesses can do right now, which is the period of weathering this storm, in the next period, thinking about recovering from the pandemic, and really beyond, building resiliency and preparing for what comes next after all of this. So we're going to go through, Eric and I, and each be talking about these 5 different actions of these areas that businesses can be exploring. And yeah, I hope you come with a lot of questions, and we're excited to be here with you. So Darren, can we go to the next one? I'm going to pass to Erica. But she might be frozen. Yeah. Well, she'll be right back with us. I know we're all having connection difficulties at times, but just to keep us going, I think we really want to make sure that the #1 priority that businesses focus on here should be prioritizing people first and thinking about safety. Where we're in a global health pandemic at this moment, this is the primary concern for everybody, is making sure that we stay safe, stay alive, thinking about your employees and your customers. And I know that most cities, most states and communities put together a lot of guidance on this. And Erica will be able to speak to it well. She'll be back on in a second. She's really an expert on that return to work and the best practices that we're thinking about, making sure that as we're continuing to operate as businesses, that we're thinking about the safety and well-being of our employees, the space in our workplaces. Oh, here we got Erica, but I spoke a little bit for you, Erica, but just really making that point that people and safety come first, especially in this health pandemic.
Yeah, so I guess that's my cue to jump in. Internet never always, always cuts out when you least need it to cut out. So really glad to be here. Yeah, it's just really an interesting time in seeing how safety is showing up across different organizations and kind of the things that are really important to each group. So of course, what we're seeing from an employee perspective, regardless of industry, is that employees are already jumping ahead from this idea of safety to total wellness. So they, definitely, you want employees are thinking, hey, I want to make sure that there's the right social distancing in place, and I want to absolutely, feel like I have my PPE and all of that. But we're also seeing them leap ahead to wellness. They're thinking, how comfortable is it going to be for me to take public transportation to come to work? There's people at home that, that I have, maybe I live with a grandparent, and maybe I live with a child that has a compromised immune system. So just what does total wellness look like? And so, when you're thinking about those safety protocols and things to prioritize, coming at it from a perspective of the whole employee is something that, we've seen consistently as we're talking with the folks that we work with, and really thinking about how to provide safety and wellness in a holistic way. The other things is that we've also seen is that, with small businesses, one of the things that are coming about is this idea of reorganizing your teams and reallocating your resources, and doing so with these new safety standards being top priority. And some of those, have meant, making things available that maybe extending leave. For some folks, I know EY has actually done that for us, extending leave. Things related to how your teams normally coordinate with each other and bringing more flexibility to how they do their work together. People playing different roles as a result of what's going on and flexing based on the need. We've seen that certainly on the government side, and we've certainly seen that in the sense of, what some small businesses should think about is they're really trying to flex to keep up with what's changing. And then the other piece, that kind of falls under, this idea of a continuous engagement is that this is kind of it's a first of its kind thing. It's weird. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And then you have that in the context of COVID, and you have that in the context of things you expected for your business being one way kind of shifting now. And so this idea of really using it as an opportunity to engage your workforce about what are we learning? What are we learning from this that makes things look a little bit different in terms of how we plan our work, what we expect from our
Well, I know we lost Erica for another second here, but I'll just continue the theme. It is this new normal of continuous engagement, and we're all learning as we go. And so the understanding of what's safe and what's not is continuing to change. And so I think this theme is going to continue to apply as we move through all the different themes in our slide. And I'll just give a second for Erica to come back. There she goes. That's the next one. Particularly strong for her. Oh, got you muted there.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. This is definitely real life happening, so appreciate the flexibility. So the last thing I'll say before we go to the next slide is that business as usual piece. It's really taking a moment to allow your employees to and engage them. There's going to be lots of disruptions, but there's going to be such an opportunity for them to, come up with ideas, to think about how you might be able to do things better or stay virtual or whatever it is. So continuously engaging them throughout that process is going to be so important, because at the end of the day, you're building trust with them that can only help your business in the long run. So why don't we go to the next slide? So business continuity is obviously really important for so many reasons, and I think we've learned so much. For example, when we were in Washington D.C. and we had an earthquake a couple years ago, which is very unexpected, that certainly impacted what people thought about our business continuity plans, right? So the unexpected can always happen. So if it's not COVID, it's something else. And so with that, what we're really encouraging a lot of companies to do and talking to a lot of companies, and they're already ahead of the game, is really rethinking and expanding what business continuity means for them. Liquidity is so important. And so how do you install a short-term cash flow monitoring principle that really allows you to predict the cash flow pressures and intervene when something comes up? I mean, that's so important. And I know all of you do that, but just this added piece and just the disturbance that's what's brought about, how can you lean forward and future forward plan for the other big things that can come, right? And so COVID is certainly expanding us. The other thing too is around how you plan for your operational risk and giving yourself the agility to respond really, really quickly. And so for that, there's a lot of things that are going on in terms of, how you monitor your direct cost escalations, what's the impact for the overall margins and that kind of thing. So really building those things into your plan so that you have the ability to respond quickly and you feel like you are doing so in such a way that is still thoughtful when you're having to move quick. The other thing, definitely alternative supply chains. I mean, that's been really interesting because I do Blue Apron. And so it's been interesting to see the impact on my Blue Apron. We order week to week in terms of the supply chain, how much is actually in there. So they've still been maintaining, but they certainly, you can see some of the impact. So just, what are those materials? What are those suppliers that you can expect to be significantly impacted, by a COVID or any other kind of thing like this? And what's your alternatives that you can go ahead and bake in? And then the last piece I'll say too is just, how does all of this affect your business plans? COVID is certainly across all industries, whether, I can't imagine being a restaurant owner at this particular time. It has a huge impact on just your budgets and your business plans. So really kind of building those plans based on multiple scenarios so that as things shift, you can predict as much as you can based on those scenarios and plan out accordingly. So with that, I'm going to pause and I'm going to pass it over to my friend Tony, who was gracious and kind of being taking care of me when I was dropping off. So I'll pass it to my friend Tony.
Well, and it's funny, I'm rethinking even too some of the themes that we have in here that go to even this presentation, that we are all adapting in this moment. And that ability to stay fluid and to be paying attention and engaged is so important to this process. And these aren't just COVID lessons. These are such strong business lessons that, we've known many of them before, and we should carry them through this and after. And I think about communication as one of those top lessons. Communication is always so important, but especially in times of crisis and as you adapt your business. If you've ever, I've done a fair amount of economic disaster planning with communities, and you'll really find that having that communications plan is one of the first steps that a city and a region has in place. Who says what and how do we direct it and how are we consistent? And I always like to just reiterate when we're thinking about communication, and something really important is that communication is a two-way street. This isn't just about sharing with other people, but it's also about listening to them and incorporating what you hear and adapting what you're doing. So really, when we're thinking about this in this moment, especially, there are 5 primary audiences that we're thinking about focusing on. And each of those will have different needs and messaging. Erica spoke really well about employees and thinking about safety first. And our employees are at the heart of our businesses, and we need to make sure that they're safe. And so helping them understand the precautions that we're taking to protect them, but also hearing their concerns and helping reassure them that they can operate according to a plan and know where they fit in and know what their role is so critical. When you think about your customers, they also need to know the precautions that we're taking and whether our services or our product delivery will be changing. But you also need to hear them and understand if there are new ways that we can reassure them or even shift our business models to serve them better. And you're only going to discover that through an open communication. Your suppliers need to know also, you need to hear if there's going to be disruptions to your supply chain, how you can integrate them into your planning. Thinking about your creditors, they're looking at you and they have their own concerns. So you really want to make sure that they're getting regular updates, that they feel comfortable with any changes that are happening with your finances. And always remembering that it's better to engage them early and identify challenges that you're having in advance and plan to work around them than come to this after the fact and be struggling to play catch up on an issue. And near and dear to my heart as an economic developer is thinking about your government and your regulators. And it's worth reaching out to them, to your government departments that you deal with in your business, first to understand if they have concerns or new resources that are available to help you. I'll talk more about that next. But especially if they're dealing with lots of businesses that are in similar situations with you, and they very well might have some great tips for you, some lessons learned. They can point you to great resources. And you also want to ensure that with this changing environment and new programs that are available or new services that you're offering, that you aren't exposing yourself to any additional risk. For example, with the Paycheck Protection Program, the federal PPP, and other loan and grant programs, there's often very specific terms and conditions that require reporting and other things as you're moving forward. And you really want to make sure that you fully understand any of those before you engage with them. And the best people to ask about that are the ones that are administering those programs, that are dealing with them. So when I'm thinking about communication overall too, I think this is a great opportunity to utilize technology and different communications channels. Many of us have websites, you got email, you have social media, and there's different ways to reach people and different ways to get your messaging out. And utilizing those tools to the best of your ability is really important. And the way that I think about doing that too is building a strong communications plan and a calendar. I'm sure, like many of us, you're all inundated with messages every day, and you don't want to overwhelm people. You want to strike that right balance of informing, of providing avenues for feedback, but not giving too much information. And something that I always stress on this too is staying open and transparent, as we've said before, but authentic with your messaging. Speak from your heart, be yourself, and get the message out about what you as a business are doing. And that's going to really keep your customers close, keep those supply chains and others really keyed into what you're doing, and help ensure that you're regularly touching base, you're delivering a consistent message, and through that plan, evolving the content and what you're sharing with your customers. Darren, can I go to the next one, please?
Yeah, so Tony, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
one of the things that you mentioned was, maybe programs like the PPP or other local programs. Last night, which today's the 17th, so on the 16th, the City Council for the City of Sacramento authorized $10 million in a loan program for small businesses that are located within the city of Sacramento. So what's that defined as? It's defined as a business of 25 full-time equivalents or less. This is a forgivable loan program. The reason I stepped in is you kind of mentioned this about, understanding and knowing what the program is going to be about. Next Wednesday at 2 o'clock, we will have a webinar, to provide the specifics on that program. And, applications will be open for a couple weeks. There's still information that's being put together. So just a great insight, obviously, to understand the programs prior to, spending the time to apply or actually receiving funding. And I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that our next webinar would be specifically on the new $10 million loan program that the council authorized.
That's excellent. And it's perfect timing for the next slide. And congratulations, that is tremendous. And I love hearing that, and all the communities that are able to do that and step up and help your local businesses, the folks on this webinar. And this is where this slide, and to Darren's point, this is really my area of expertise as an economic development practitioner. So I love being able to share about this. And I love Darren brought that up, and that people here are listening and share that news, because the truth is that too many businesses fail to take advantage of the numerous policies and programs that are available to support you. These can come from the federal, the state, local government, and even others. There are nonprofits out there doing things. And there's a lot of different forms out there. I talked about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and that was part of the federal government's CARES Act. And the CARES Act has a lot of different features to it that's hard for many of us to understand. But many state and local governments have created additional programs like this program that Darren just mentioned, and that you're going to learn more about next Wednesday. Sometimes even with CARES Act funding that came down to communities. And these programs are designed to help people and businesses, but it's hard to know about them if you're not paying attention or hearing the right messaging or wherever you might catch your information. So sharing that is good, and reaching out to folks like Darren, people at the city, chambers of commerce, other representatives to really ask them, is this something I should be looking at? What's available? Because these can range from forgivable loans, low interest loans, there's grant programs, and much more. Additionally, COVID-19, aside from COVID-19 specific programs, before COVID, and to this other theme of these are more than just the pandemic, a lot of these group programs existed before and will continue to exist. Groups like the Small Business Administration and others can provide technical assistance, mentoring, and business advising. There's workforce training grants and other programs. I'm sure that there's safety related efforts that are out there. People want you to succeed. Your city, your state, your federal government is out here to try to help you through this. So really get involved with these things. I'd say before participating though, as Darren said, it's helpful to fully understand the compliance and other requirements that might go along with them. And there's usually, whether it's online resources or individuals you can reach out to make sure that they make sense. But really don't be deterred by what you don't know. It never hurts to ask. There's people there to assist you. I think of the best examples of this are what we've seen for decades after natural disasters. I was working with the Sonoma County government after their wildfires 3 years ago, which were just devastating in the community. But then, as we've seen in a lot of other California communities after fires, there's often lots of funds available that people don't even apply for because they think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. My business didn't burn down. Well, actually your business didn't have to burn down. If you had any disruption to your business because fire's happening elsewhere, you could be eligible, but people just didn't know. And so the more you ask, the more you'll find that there's things out there to assist you. And really it's so important to take the best advantage of those that you can, because otherwise they're just going to go to waste. But Darren, can we go to the next one? And I guess I've got some of my thoughts, just themes here, but I think Erica and I both could speak to this, is that overall, I always think building resilience, I call it the new normals with an S. It's a constantly and rapidly changing environment. So as Erica pointed out at the beginning, keep monitoring the situation and be prepared to change again and again and again. This is a continuous engagement. The economy is changing, the conditions are changing, the pandemic, all of these things, and we're really learning as we go. But so many of the lessons that we know, we learned before, and we just have to remember them and reintegrate them and keep them going. Especially as Erica mentioned with the business planning, this is the time to consider the threats that are out there and plan for how to address them. But know that eventually it will end, and what's on the other side is going to be different. So while we're in this crisis right now, be ready for that recovery, but really be thinking about what's your business going to be looking like beyond, and how do we build that resiliency and plan as much as we can right now for that next step going forward. Erica, any additional last
Yeah,
thoughts?
absolutely. I think the other thing I would add is be kind to yourself and be kind to your teams, because this is, as we've talked throughout, this is hard. It's new. And I think, the best of us, we do like to plan and we like to lay everything out. But this situation that we're in and kind of the uncertainty in the future, we have, in some ways, we have to make decisions rather quickly. And be kind to yourself as you're doing that, and keeping that agility so that you can, you can put some things in place, you can see what works, and then pivot as needed. That's really important. And I think the other thing too is that from a change management perspective and an employee perspective, I'm sure the folks on this phone are working longer hours than they might have in other periods of time. So if you're, and I know there's, certain businesses that have very much a public facing perspective on it. So there's an added pressure of that anxieties around that. And then in addition, there's a lot of folks that are just working longer hours. And so, being cognizant of that as you are working with your employees and working with your teams to really think through and pivot where you need to be, because a lot of that work makes sense. And then a lot of it is just, a lot of it, you just have to check in with people and check in with yourself as leaders of your businesses to make sure that you're continuing to make smart and you're continuing to be present as you're working those additional hours. The other thing that I will also flag, as we wrap up, and this goes a little bit more into the change management piece, change management, it's one of those things that sounds fluffy and really isn't. There's a lot of science behind it, but it's really like all the stuff that you do from a communications, a training perspective, a culture perspective, as you prepare your employees to do something different, and understand they have to adapt differently. And, they have to focus on adopting these changes, whether it's something with your process, something with your systems, or whatever it is. And that takes time. So as you're figuring out where you're going, even if you don't necessarily have a communications person as part of, your small business, just the biggest thing is just to give yourself the time and space to think like what that experience needs to be for your employees. What do you need from them at specific milestones along your path? And then based on each of those milestones, work backwards in terms of like, how do you get your employees to that milestone so that they're ready when it comes time to pull that lever a different kind of way, or use a different resource, because that's the way the work is going to be different now. And so it just takes some time. You don't have to be a change management specialist. It's just giving yourself some time to think about those things and plan for it. And it doesn't always have to be pretty how the communications come out, but it's just giving yourself the time and space to think through it, as you go. And so that's the other piece I would just recommend. Think about change management, be kind to yourself, and take some breaks as you're figuring this out.
Yeah, that is such a good point. Reminder to myself too. I saw your friend make that point recently that this is not that you sit down during a marathon, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. We got a long way to go, and if you don't rest and take care of yourself, and we're not going to make it. So it's always good. And I just said, reiterate again, take advantage of what's out there. Darren and the city's office, and all the programs. People are here to help you. We don't have to do this alone.
Yeah.
Well, and just on the screen, we wanted to have our California state representative contacts here. I know Stacy is attending our webinar today as well.
Hey, Stacy.
Hey there.
So yeah, these are great contacts to reach out to. They are wonderful and very responsive. So if you have questions and want to do a little deeper dive and talk a little bit more, they're the perfect people to reach out to, and we're here to support and chat.
Great. Well, thank you, Tony and Eric. I'm going to go ahead and take down our PowerPoint so everybody can kind of see the three of us, and we can kind of, I'll ask a few of the questions that I've received. Well, first of all, I just really want to thank the two of you for ANY for being here. Now, I don't know if people, read the little fine print on the speaker's bio, but just a little bit about EY. It's a global leader in a variety of issues. And, one of the things that it mentions here on your guys' slide is 84% of the Fortune Global 500 and 72% of the Forbes Global 2000 are clients of EY. So for the participants on the webinar right now, and for those listening later, Obviously, this is a great connection to an amazing organization and two amazing staff members that can provide us some information. And I really appreciate the 5 things that you talked about. And you know, maybe kind of starting at the beginning where you talked about prioritizing people, safety, continuous engagement. You know, Eric, I was thinking about it. How about if you're a business that you have not? You have not engaged with your employees. You have not engaged with your customers. Where do you start? What would kind of be your recommendation of how you just kind of get that going?
Yeah, so if you haven't engaged yet, there's a couple of things that, you know, that you can start just to take a few steps. So one would be is just thinking about who those people are and what their roles are in terms of, you know, whatever your business is. You know, so it may be that there's different kinds of suppliers that fall into different categories, and there's different ways that they interact with your organization. So just trying to understand how you interact with them. And when things are hotter versus colder in terms of, you know, the back and forth and that kind of thing. The other thing I would do too is, and when you're looking at those, is thinking about what is it that you need from them, what is it that they need from you, and what kind of impact do you anticipate as a result of whatever's going on, like a COVID or something else in the future. So that's one of the easiest pieces. 3 points: what it is you need from them, what they need from you, and then what do you anticipate changing. So that's the first piece that you could do rather quickly. Doesn't have to be fancy, you just identify it. Then the other piece to think about is that, and I would take it kind of slow depending on what your business is and what your business can tolerate, but think about it in terms of 30, 60, 90 days. You know, that's like the immediate stuff. What are the milestones that you're going to hit? Is there, if you are an organization that has a lot of product, you know, is there going to be some, and Christmas is coming up. How is that going to impact your supply chain? What kind of things do you need? That kind of thing. And get on the phone with those people quick, you know? And again, it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be pretty. Get on the phone with those people quick and understand what they're thinking about, understand what you're thinking about, and start figuring out, okay, putting together a rough plan of things that need to happen. The other thing I would recommend too is definitely engage. You know, this is when you talk about the communications piece, is that understand that you will have to say something, and sometimes telling folks that you're figuring it out is okay. And then, you know, and really not doing communications in a silo, because once you put stuff out there, it's out there. And the worst is having to go back and change things frequently. So use your leadership teams, your COO or your finance manager, who everyone trusts and really knows the clients, you know, really knows your customer base. Pull those people together and really think that, you know, really make sure that you're not just shooting off a message really quick without being able to feel comfortable about what you're sending. And part of that is bringing people in to kind of help you with that, because you're certainly not alone. So those are some initial things that I would do. It can get fancier from there, but, you know, just knowing what you're working with first and not feeling like you have to, and doing it as quick as possible, you will be lightning steps ahead, you know, versus some other folks sometimes. So does that answer the question, Darren?
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I think one of the things that you brought up that's is key is, you know, as you're thinking 30, 60, 90 days, you know, your suppliers, you mentioned suppliers. Many of your suppliers might be in the exact same situation you are in. And the sooner and the earlier you make that contact with them to let them know where you are, what you need, the better. And, you know, I know Tony kind of talked about lenders and, you know, making contact, right? And a word he used was be authentic and consistent with your messaging. So key points. I'm really glad you talked about suppliers. That's key. And maybe I'm going to stick with you again, Erica. You know, you talked about scenarios within your business plan and having multiple scenarios, right, of how you're going to handle that. And, you know, and I'm looking at a few of the people that are on our attendees today. I see a couple small businesses, right, sole proprietors, and a couple that are a little bit larger. You know, how does that small business owner that has only been in business a couple of years, they were just starting to, you know, see their revenue come, how do they amend, or where would you direct them to? Either if they don't have a business plan, is there a place that you might recommend they go, or who to talk to kind of get started, to kind of have that discussion. And then again, as you talked about, having multiple scenarios of how you might deal with it.
Yeah, so I'm going to have Tony answer that one, and then I'm going to add some color. I know my friend will probably have him, should start first, and then I'll add some color on top of that, if that's okay, Darren.
Yeah, and no, I appreciate that. It's funny. I don't know, and I apologize. I should have looked this up specific for Sacramento, but it's like your small business administration office anywhere. There are folks there that are trained to really help you do that, building a business plan, from soup to nuts with instructions and assistance. Usually the Chamber of Commerce might have some resources like that as well, from other businesses that really can give you some guidance and experience and mentorship. And generally, and Darren, I'm sure you can speak more directly, like in Sacramento, to the types of smaller business focused associations, in addition to your office, that might have some of those resources available. But really, there are people and programs out there designed specifically for that, from both government and private sector side, to help people walk through this. And yeah, I think
Tony, you mentioned programs that are all free of charge, right?
Yes.
Yes, all of these.
For our region, we have the Capital Region SBDC, which their website is Capital Region SBDC.com. SBDC standing for Small Business Development Center. These are all free of charge programs. This isn't something that costs you money, right? That they're here to help and provide assistance, which you kind of talked about how many businesses are like, well, I don't qualify for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't ever assume you don't qualify. I'd say, people are sitting there waiting for you to knock on their door, and if you knock, they'll help you out.
The other thing I wanted to add to that piece was this idea of what the scenario planning is. I would recommend not getting too intimidated by that phrase, because if you're a sole proprietor, that could just mean, what do you do if you have an interruption in your supplier and your plans B and C don't work? It could be, if you're sole proprietor and 60% of your business is from one particular customer. What do you do in that scenario? Another scenario could be, what do you do if there's a second wave of an outbreak, which, from the COVID-19 now, based on what we know, and you have an outbreak in your organization, where someone, has tested positive and was at work yesterday, what do you do in that situation based on what we've known before? Maybe 6 to 9 months ago, you wouldn't have thought about something like that. But now that you do know that, what do you need to think about this fall if a resurgence comes about, and how will you respond? So the scenarios can get as complex or as simple as is important for your business. And it doesn't matter how you track it, as long as you think about it and you note it, whether it's in Excel, PowerPoint, Word document. Doesn't have to be pretty. It's just documenting it, thinking through it, and then having a place to start from when it happens.
Yes, thanks for those insights. Maybe just 2 more questions. So specifically, Tony, you talked about keep monitoring the situation, right? And the new normals, plural.
Yeah.
So the City of Sacramento, we do have a website, cityofsacramento.org/COVID-19-relief, where we put out information about our programs. We try to be very, very simple, and then connect you to some other websites. I don't know if you, off the top of your head, might have resources. And maybe for me, just to add on, this is kind of like when you're a business, when you're thinking about your customer, you don't market to them once, right? So it's the exact same thing in the situation that we're in. You don't go look for programs one time. You need to continue monitoring them. So above and beyond maybe local websites, do you have any ideas of kind of national sites that people might go to, or an email they might sign up for to get information?
That's a really good question. And I apologize, I don't have one top of mind specific, but I would say, for whatever business that you're in, there's generally a great national industry association, and whether or not you're a member, many of them are publishing regular information and updates, and that can be really valuable to hear, what is happening in the restaurant supply business. So particularly that one's got to be facing some trouble right now. But those organizations are spending all day, every day, compiling information from across the country and trying to share that out to folks. So that's a really valuable place to check in. Similarly, chambers of commerce, and those don't have to be the regional full scale ones. There can be, Black chambers of commerce, Hispanic chambers of commerce, other subgroups and different organizations in communities that can really have a lot of valuable resources out there. And in two, I think partially it is monitoring internally. I know, I can be bad personally about always checking my bank account, but it's really one of those things to just make sure, like Erica was saying, checking your books and thinking about what might come up, and really, really monitoring your own numbers more than you might normally to make sure that you're catching anything before it escalates and becomes a problem. It's terrible making health analogies during a pandemic, but it is, getting those regular checkups. You want to catch something as early as possible and make sure that you're bringing in the right experts and doctors and kind of perspectives on things. So, I know I do this, as an economic developer. I'm looking at the national job numbers and industry numbers regularly, and even on the pandemic side, I personally track my state and local pandemic numbers every morning, just so I can know what's going on. But yeah, I think industry associations would be a really good resource.
Tony, you said that you didn't know off the top of your head, but you just gave a great response. So thank you. Right. And like you said, most of these, you are, especially right now, you are not required to be a member of many of these organizations. Yeah. Back in the day, maybe it was, and obviously they have services that are for their members only. But obviously they want to see their industry succeed, and they see it as a benefit. So great insight, Tony, and thank you. So maybe I don't have any other questions in front of me, but I do want to mention, I want to quote what Tony said. Tony said, "Don't be deterred by what you don't know." And, I see that's a positive statement. And I know during times of crisis, it's very easy to be deterred, especially when you don't understand. And one of the things that I've heard from both of you is obviously it's okay, right? To be authentic, to use a couple of words, and even, you talked about who says what or what will they say, and more than anything, Erica said, it's a two-way street. So maybe you're talking, but more than anything, you're trying to listen to your customer. And just really great insight. So maybe I'll turn it back over to you if you guys want to have any final thoughts, and then from there I can close out the webinar.
I'll go first. I just thankful to be here. It's wonderful to talk to the folks from the city of Sacramento and talk to these businesses. So I just really appreciate your time, and I hope the information here was helpful. Sacramento is a wonderful city, so I've been there, and so just glad to have had this time with you guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, and I just say the same. Thank you so much. I just told Darren I have family in Sacramento, and I used to live in California. I'm based in Texas now, but we work all over the country, and I like being engaged with this. And to the point overall, I think that I just remember is that people are here to help. It's easy when we're distanced to feel isolated and to feel far away, but there are so many resources out here, and I'm always amazed by how much reaching out and asking for assistance that people are willing to be there. And so I love and appreciate being able to be a part of this and just engage with folks, and hope that people find this helpful. And so thank you.
Great. Well, thank you once again, and to EY for participating in our webinar today. This is part of our webinar series, Resilience, Repurpose, and Recovery, which we hold every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Next week, we will have a program on the city's new $10 million loan recovery program. So we'll be getting out information. Hope that you'll sign in and ask as many questions as you'd like. Would encourage you, a couple of the city's website. One for our webinars is cityofsacramento.org/biz-webinars. Additionally, if you go to the city's Facebook page, and sign up on the economic development page, we'll continuously push out information there, and also these recordings are there. So once again, I just want to thank the two of you, Tony, Eric, Erica, just a wealth of knowledge that you've been able to provide us today. And we will see you next Wednesday. Thank you.